Good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public that may be joining us via the webcast this evening. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting of Cabinet here in Maidstone Town Hall today, Tuesday, the 19th of March, 2024. I'll very quickly recap the usual matters of housekeeping. I'm sure you already have all telephonic and digital devices in their most silent form. I'd like to also confirm there are no planned fire drills or the like this evening. So should we hear a sound that might resemble such, please consider it to be real and pause for a moment and then follow the instructions of our democratic service officers who will advise us on the best route for evacuation. As previously alluded, we are recording tonight's event for playback on our YouTube channel and it is broadcast live. May I inquire if anybody else is thinking of recording this evening? And I ask that not to prevent you, but just so others in the room would be aware. Nobody's waving a camera at me, so I don't think that's the case this evening. Don't think I've forgotten anything, so we can get straight to business. And I would start with item 1. Apologies, we have a full house this evening, so there's no apologies from Cabinet. Urgent items. There are no urgent items, but there are some urgent updates. So if I could just carefully talk you through those. You should all have in front of you a suitably enlarged page, which is an updated page for, I believe, page 869, which is item 18. That page is also contained elsewhere within the report, but it does update that particular page for completeness. Also, in relation to item 18, we have a note in front of us of the considerations from the Pied Pack in relation to that item. And similar to that, urgent updates at item 19, feedback from the pack, item 20, feedback from the pack, and 22 and 25, feedback or no additional comments as the case may be. That's confirmed by way of urgent update to us as well. So I don't think I've missed anything there other than to say you will also find in front of you a very late in the day item of correspondence from our dearest colleagues at Kent County Council, and they have wanted to draw to Cabinet's attention this evening that they're still grumbling about the provision of the school and highways and the like. I don't think there's anything new in there that hasn't been presented to us previously, but I would urge that we take time to read that through so that we can, of course, give it full consideration in our later deliberations. Would you like to just take a moment to read that now? Yes, a few nods. So for the outside world, that's what we're doing. We're just familiarising ourselves with that piece of correspondence. And once we've done so, we will resume our agenda. So we will consider that when we come to agenda item 18. So for the benefit of the webcast, there are a couple of members still just digesting that urgent update. Are we about there, members, or do you need another minute? One more minute, I think that indication said. Members, may I ask if you've got through that now? Okay, I think it was worth taking the time to read that thoroughly so that we can give it appropriate consideration when we come to the relevant item. If I might return to the agenda, and I shall invite visiting members with us to come to the speakers table, announce themselves and indicate to which items they may or may not wish to speak.
Councillor Newton, just observing.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. That is noted.
Councillor Patrick Coates, item 9.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can I just ask you to press the button and turn that one? There, I can do it from here. Okay. Item 4, disclosures by members or officers. Are there any disclosures, please? No indications, none to be noted. And I'm going to ask about lobbying next at agenda item 5. Can I take it as read that we're all lobbied on agenda item, I should know it's 18. All lobbied on that. Any other agenda items where there may be lobbying to mention? I can't think of any. speaking personally, no other indications. So just a note that we're lobbied on 18. Item 16, for a moment, let us consider if all items can be considered in open session. We do have some yellow pages. I believe it's likely that we can deal with the associated agenda items in open session. But if we do need to refer in more detail, we can go into part 2. But I propose that we're in open session. Is that agreed, members? I thank you. The minutes of the meeting on the 7th of February 2024. You might find these at page 1. Circulated with the papers. Everybody's had a chance to look. May I inquire if there are any matters of accuracy that concerns anyone? Doesn't look like it, in which case, with your agreement, I shall sign them as a true record. Is that agreed? Thank you. I shall repeat that process now for the meeting held on the 14th of February 2024. Again, you have those pages in your agenda packs. Simply matters of accuracy. With your agreement, I'll sign them as a true record. Is that agreed? Again, I thank you. Item 9, presentation of petitions. We do have a petition before us this evening. It is to be presented to us by Councillor Coates, and I would invite you to come to the speakers table, and I believe you have 5 minutes to address us in relation to the petition. So the floor is yours.
Evening, everybody. Councillor Paul Harper cannot be here today due to work commitments. He's asked me to read out this statement for your meeting tonight. The Astor of Hever former farmland consists of 5.78 acres in the Fanton Oakwood ward, bounded by Bowermount Road, the Jehovah Witness, Oakwood Park Grammar School, playing fields, and Astor Park. The former Astor of Hever Secondary School had this land and Astor Park as a school farm until the end of the 1990s. This land is owned by Kent County Council. Kent County Council has been trying to develop the land for housing for a couple of decades. KCC would like to build at least 60 houses on this site. Access is a problem to this landlocked site. The only access point is from Astor Park onto Oakwood Road. There has in August 2023 been a lot of surveying of this access site. Clearly KCC are looking to see how they could potentially access the site from here. However, the width is not sufficient for a 2-lane road plus a pavement. It would be almost impossible for safe access to be driven through this choke point. And even if it were, the additional traffic on Oakwood Road, and he's put in brackets where I live, but I don't live there. Okay, Paul does. So it would be considerable and potentially dangerous, as it's likely to create a conflict between pedestrians on the Oakwood Road heading to the educational campus and drivers coming out of the new site. We undertook a petition to establish if residents were still of the previous view that they did not want the site built on. And almost unanimously, response we heard was, yes, we want to keep it as a green space. We want to work with residents to create a community woodland or orchard on the site. This would enhance biodiversity and address climate change, as well as being the community, bringing the community more together, which is a good thing in itself. Tonight, I'm asking you to please ensure the site remains out of the current local plan update, and that instead we look to designate it as a green space for outdoor community use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. That was very clear. Thank you. Members, there are several ways in which we could deal with this petition, but may I recommend to you that since we have on our agenda this evening, agenda item 18, which is the local plan consideration, that petition would directly relate to that item. May I recommend that we consider it when we get there? Is that agreed? Thank you. That seems a sensible way forwards. I can, for expediency, take on block items 10 through to 16. We have no business on any of those items before us this evening, which means that we arrive at agenda item 17, which is the forward plan for Cabinet, pages 8 through 15. It's just for noting, but I will double check if either members or officers have anything they need to draw to our attention on the forward plan. But I think it's pretty straightforward. And as we approach the inevitable election season, I'm sure lots of things will reappear once that's out of the way. Members, is the forward plan noted? Thank you. So let us get into agenda item 18. It's the big one. Oh, that's not to belittle the other agenda items we have, but it's perhaps one of the biggest that we will ever consider. Maidstone Borough Local Plan Review, 2021 through 38. We need to consider if we are minded to recommend to council to adopt or not. I'm going to ask Councillor Cooper to perhaps just give us a starter for 10, and then we will open the debate.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I won't give the full introduction as to the history of how we've got to where we are to Cabinet this evening, because I think you, Mr. Chairman, in particular, but all of the members of the Cabinet are particularly well versed and have had ample opportunity to read through the documents. I will, however, paraphrase some of the matters which came up last evening at the Policy Advisory Committee and just run through that, because I think it is very important that we consider those matters in advance of the full council meeting tomorrow evening. So,
may I just ask you, will that substantially cover the urgent update, or do we need to track if we need to?
It will substantially cover the urgent update. As it happens, the notes are in the same order as the urgent update, so
Excellent.
it will
right.
assist you in tracking.
I'll leave you to cover the update.
And it will allow me not to speak at too much length about it. So I'm pleased to say that last night the recommendation, which was moved by Councillor McKenna, there were 5 members who voted for, 1 member did vote against, and there were 2 abstentions. Some of the matters which were raised last night were about the loss of control of planned development, should we not adopt a plan. And on that point, I think it's very important to note that our adopted plan is largely out of date, and should we not adopt a new plan immediately, we would lose our 5-year housing land supply, which I'm sure we'll have the implications of that. Matters came up about the difficulties providing strategic infrastructure should we not have a plan, and also the inability for us to produce proposed planning documents, some of which are already underway and some of which are proposed within the local plan. It has taken many years for us to get to this position, so without a plan we will be left for some while before we will be able to get to the same stage of adoption again. It would be years, not months. The spatial allocation wouldn't please all was a point that was raised last night, and having sat at many meetings, I think we would all be very cognizant to remember that there is opposition to some allocations within the spatial plan, but it was very well raised by various members of the committee yesterday evening that the spatial plan the spatial strategy has already been decided and has been examined, and we're in no position now to change that spatial plan. It is the suite of policies that we need to have in place, and we could only get in place, Mr. Chairman, if we were to adopt this local plan. There were some robust questions about the highly publicised issue of the duty to cooperate with Medway Council. The inspector has dealt with those matters in quite a lot of detail, and has agreed that he believes that whilst it is a duty to cooperate and not necessarily a duty to agree, he believes that not only have we met the requirements, but there is the basis for ongoing dialogue to deal with the strategic matters at hand. I'll move on now, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to the letter which we have received today from Kent County Council. I welcome that letter, and I think it is very important that the matters which are in there are at the top of our agenda going forwards. Once we adopt a plan, that is not the end. It is perhaps the beginning of the end. And I am pleased that KCC are showing that they are very keen to iron out these matters. And I hope that with ongoing dialogue, we can, once the plan is adopted. And it really does show the importance for us as a council to continue working with Kent County Council and other infrastructure providers. However, the matters addressed within that letter aren't new, and I'm confident that they have all been addressed in the inspector's report, which we received just nearly 2 weeks ago. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, very briefly just touch on the petition that Councillor Coates has raised. There is no allocation in the spatial strategy for this emerging local plan, which will be dealt with tomorrow evening at Council for the site that Councillor Coates has mentioned. And I think all of the issues that Councillor Coates has raised and cited this evening are precisely why it is beneficial for this borough to have a development plan in place so that we can mitigate the potential harms of development. Mr. Chairman, there are 2 recommendations as per the recommendation from Pied Pack this evening, and I'm happy to move as per the update from Pied yesterday evening. Thank you.
Excellent, that's very useful. And may I, for clarity, we have the amended page, part 2 recommendation. The second recommendation probably covers the delegated authority to put that in, but you're moving with that amendment, yes. Members, does anybody want to offer a comment or a consideration? While you're just mulling that over, I'm going to start by saying a little bit more about the petition. As Councillor Cooper has pointed out, the site referred to is not an allocation in the plan. Now, it's right that County Council on a number of occasions have sought to bring that forward for a commercial housing development. But members of this council were very clear through the plan making process that they did not want that site included. I think it double underlines, triple underlines the importance of adopting the plan, that this council adopts the plan. And I suspect that may be our recommendation to council tomorrow, to ensure that our local plan does not become silent because it's out of date and invite speculative developers to opportunistically put applications in when we have no policy nor spatial strategy to rebut them. So I think the adoption of the local plan is the key instrument to protect that site. I would add that I've always felt very passionately that that's part of the education campus there and should remain within that curtilage for those purposes. And dare I even say it, I would love one day for a return of a school farm, because I think that's an ingredient of education that is sadly missing. But the point is, if we adopt the plan, that site's not in. The plan says where development shall take place, but more importantly, it signals where it shall not. So I think that addresses the matter of the petition and gives us a very good reason. Does any other member want to add a comment at this stage? Councillor Russell, and I am of course looking for a seconder.
Thank you. I don't think this is an easy thing for anybody. I think we realise what these figures mean across the borough. I mean, the newest information is obviously the letter from the inspector, and he said the plan review was needed because we needed to address a significant uplift in housing need from 883 dwellings in Annam to 1,157, an increase of 31%. I think we need not lose sight of that's how we arrived here in the first place. And it's not an easy thing to place that quantum of housing. Moving on from that, I think he is an independent inspector. I've read through his letter carefully, and obviously he's saying it's the ability to comprehensively and positively create new places from the outset to secure longer term benefits that would be difficult to secure through incremental and individual smaller scale developments. And I think before I was even on the council, as I understood it from the Pied Pack last night, that's what some of the members were saying, that it was a cross-party vision to try and secure some infrastructure that's desperately needed. That's probably all I want to say about that. The KCC letter is obviously the newest new thing that we've got. So looking through that, I just was interested in the bit where they were saying there's no surplus or slack and any increase in demand for secondary pupils will require mitigation. I can only imagine that would be through Section 106 or SIL or similar. And I can't speak for everybody, but one of my parish councils is absolutely fantastic and they itemise every Section 106 and SIL. So from one development in 2013, we've got £244,818.32 for secondary school. When another one, we've got £96,751.80. Then we've got two more, one for £430,000 and one for £211,000, bringing us to a grand total just from one of my 5 villages that I represent, which is £983,513.82, of which none of that has been spent by KCC currently for secondary education expansion. So my concern with this letter, and obviously it's new news, so I would appreciate more information, is that there would seem to be some surplus and some slack. And I just wonder, I mean, it's not my authority, but I would like that looked into more before we accept this particularly as read. So that's probably everything from me on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying desperately to remember the name of the fund that the county council have access to with education provision, which one of the officers will probably remind me, that education support fund, that. Yeah, perhaps just whisper it into the microphone for us all, please.
Education support grant.
That's the one. I've nearly got it right. Education support grant. So Councillor Russell, in considering the county's letter, has identified some of the pots of money, but that particular grant fund, I believe, is designed to support some of these funding gaps, and there's an odd £1 million there, but I think when I last discussed it with county, there's something like 60 million or something in that fund. That they've got to do a lot with it, but there are substantial amounts of money at people's disposal to address this. So I think that we would obviously want to work very closely with the county moving forwards, and perhaps the delivery of the SPD for that particular site, which is one of the local plan requirements, will be one of the mechanisms where we put the detail to what the inspector has already said is an acceptable, sound solution to providing the education. I'll stop at that point, and I've got Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, then Councillor Garton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to second Councillor Cooper's recommendation. I think it is important that we have this plan. Without it, we have no control over where the housing goes. It's patently obvious in my role as Cabinet Member for Housing and Health that we have a shortage in housing in the borough. And whilst none of us want to, if you like, paper over or build over the countryside, we've got children, we've got families, and people are coming into the borough and they need good quality housing. And this, to my mind, is the best way to do it in a controlled and thoughtful way. And I know how much work has gone into this plan, so I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And to you, Councillor Garton.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I really just wanted to second Councillor Cooper, so I was beaten to it now. We came a very long way developing this local plan review. And I remember sitting in this room in workshops, many workshops since 2017, really. And it may be not a perfect plan, but is a good plan and a suitable plan, and a plan which will protect for the next years this borough from unwanted and unregulated development. And I'm really incensed. I didn't really want to speak tonight unless somebody winds me up, and I'm afraid the officer from the upper tier authority who drafted that letter actually achieved that, to wind me up. It comes from a local authority who sends no officers to our planning meetings. It comes from an upper tier authority which refuses to send officers to the Joint Transportation Board. And then we get at the very last moment this lobbying letter. I think this is not more than a lobbying letter, and that's why I'm so incensed about it. And this officer certainly does not understand what a local plan does. It protects and plans out useful development in our borough according to national guidelines. That's what we achieved. And that's why it is a good plan, not without fault, but it's a good plan, and it will protect us from unwanted excessive development.
Thank you. Yeah, to reiterate, I think every aspect of the letter that we have before us is best served by an adopted plan. The adopted plan commits us to SPDs for Heathlands, for Lidsing, for Invicta Barracks, and that's the process that would make the detail, and we would want to work with the county to actually achieve that detail. I wouldn't for 1 minute think that they're asking us not to adopt would link to the petition, but I think there's an irony there that if we didn't adopt, of course, county could promote their site and build that opportunistic housing. I'm sure that's not their motive at all, but it could be a consequence of this council not holding firm, but actually needing to embrace the inspector's recommendation. So look, it's a big night tomorrow for this council to consider it. It's moved and seconded as per the papers that we recommend to full council adoption. If nobody else wants to speak at this stage, I'll take that to the vote. Those in favour, please. I need say no more, that is unanimous. We will be recommending to full council tomorrow for adoption. Thank you for everybody that's contributed to it, and we will continue tomorrow. So let us pick up the other business on our agenda this evening, please. The next one, agenda item 19, third quarter finance performance risk monitoring report. Councillor Perry, would you be kind enough to just give us the insight of your wisdom here? It's principally your portfolio.
I like the sound of that,
And
Chair.
thank you to the spatial planning team who are getting out while they can for assisting us. Sorry, Councillor Perry.
No, thank you. This is a fairly, it's not a standard item, but it's something that obviously comes out on a fairly regular basis. What it does report is that the financial position at the end of the third quarter is still very, very good. There are swings and roundabouts within it. We know that temporary accommodation is still an issue and is still obviously a risk. But nevertheless, on the other side, we have the interest charge to us has reduced because interest rates have come down. But at the same time, through our very good negotiations in terms of loans, we've been able to loan money out and make money as well. So on that side, we have a very positive situation. The forecast for the end of the year is still a deficit, but it's a reduced deficit from what we were talking about before. And we're currently forecasting around about 238,000, which is built into our future precept calculations. So we still have a very sound, I think, financial position. The capital spend budget has slipped. I think this is understandable because it's largely based on housing acquisitions, and that sometimes and it's a little bit to be expected. But nevertheless, we are in a very good sound position. I'd like to thank the staff, particularly the finance staff who I worked fairly closely with, for all the hard work on this, because they've done a lot. But it's applied right across the board as well to all the directors and heads of service to find the savings that allowed us to keep this council in such a very good position, I think. The other issues I would like to just tackle, we have put a proposal forward to change the level for contracts approvals, which is currently a delegated approvals, which is at 75,000 at the moment, and that proposal is going to go to 100,000. And I think this reflects the changes in costs, the growth rates and everything else. Another issue that's coming up is there are some write-offs. They are, I'm afraid, a little bit out of our hands really, because they reflect either companies that are no longer in situation, or they're in liquidation. So there's not that many, and they refer to the business, basically the business rates. Now, apart from that, I think they're the main issues I would particularly like to highlight. KPIs is a separate agenda item, and I'll refer to that when we come to the KPIs. But in generally speaking, we are in a very, very, I think, very, very good position. So that's the rough summary, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any initial comments, anyone? I think the one that I would like to particularly draw attention to, and I know we've done it before, but it is identified that budget pressure on our temporary accommodation. You know, that's the real sharp end of our housing duty, where, you know, people turn up and they have nowhere, and we have a duty to house them, at least on a temporary basis, while more permanent. And that immediate cost, higher than normal cost, falls to us, so the overnight accommodation or the rest of it. It's a symptom of the shortage of housing and the cost of housing that a shortage propagates. So I think we're very mindful of that, and it sharpens my thinking yet again for the importance of having a plan to deliver the housing needs of this borough. Any other comments, anyone? So you're moving per the papers, Councillor Perry?
There are two items on there which do, most are for noting, but there's two items. One is the contract change in the contract levels for delegated approval, and the other are the write-offs, and we need to, I believe, have to approve those, or recommend approval anyway. but the rest are for noting. Thank you.
That would be the recommendation 6 in relation to business rates and 7
Yes, indeed.
particular
Yeah.
to the contract level.
Yeah.
Councillor Garton.
Mr. Chairman, let me just grab the chance to second this one and also to relay the same thanks which Councillor Perry gave to our officers. We are probably a very exemplary or a local authority in a very exemplary financial position thanks to our officers.
And always mindful of impending risks on the horizon. Okay, moved, seconded. Those in favour, please. So that's all noted and agreed unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Perry, it's you again to help us with agenda item 20, the update on the key performance indicators for the year ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. The two things I want to really highlight here, the delightful acronym of OFLOG, which means the Office for Local Government, has set out is planning a set of new metrics to measure the performance of local authorities across the board, across the country. And I think this is actually a very, very good idea. But it leads on to ourselves developing our own set of metrics that reflect the metrics of the OFLOG. And we are looking into that now. And I think we set out some 9 metrics that we hope to introduce. This will be for the next financial year, not for the current financial year. I think this is a very good thing. So there's a lot of progress for that. One of the things that this was discussed at the PAC on Monday, and out of that, the PAC made a recommendation, which in fact we have this information any rate, which we have internally, that we could develop it into a KPI, and it's basically the percentage of freedom of information against the environmental information regulations. So it's a new metric, and this is proposed, and you'll see it in the recommendations that you have in front of you, and I certainly would support that. But generally speaking, the KPIs are basically at this stage for noting. I don't think it's anything I particularly want to highlight, although particularly in my own area, I have to say the council tax collection rates are pretty well on target. The business rates are a little bit better than target. The council tax is fractionally below, but it's pretty well, if you rounded it all out, it actually would be on target. So that's in a pretty good position. So I think that's all I really want to say. I'd say the main issues that can be noted, and this recommendation to be approved. Thank you. For introduction for next year.
And you're moving on that. You're moving that motion so that the draft performance indicators Appendix A be agreed. The changes in reporting arrangements are noted, and the additional key performance indicator relating to freedom of information requests be added to corporate services draft performance. That's just to get the words on record. That's, I think, what you're moving, isn't it, Councillor Berry? And Councillor Mrs. Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just really picking up on something that came through my policy advisory committee, which was that there was a KPI for visitors to the museum, and they wanted to see if that could be split between the footfall to the museum and the footfall to the visitors information centre, which, as you all know, is within the museum itself, into 2 separate KPIs. So we did check that out with the officer team, but we can't do that because at the moment it's an automated door mechanism that counts the people that come in. So to be able to differentiate between the two, we'd have to revert to some physical counting, which we don't think would be beneficial because that would take up museum staff time. So I've looked at it, looked at the recommendations, but I don't suggest that we change what we've got. But on that basis, happy to second Councillor Perry's motion.
Okay, that makes sense. Any further comments, members? Moved, seconded. Those in favour, please. Unanimous. That's dealt with. Thank you very much. Agenda item 21. This is lighting and greening initiatives for Maidstone Town Centre. So I think we're all aware that we've got money in the prosperity funding that we had originally identified for both of these initiatives. The money is time sensitive, as in if we don't spend it, we potentially lose it. So it is very important that we now get on with the actual delivery of those intentions. Two parts to it: the lighting. We're wanting to light some of our historic buildings, make them look better. We want to use lighting to enhance the feeling of safety around our town centre. And we want to use lighting to improve what people would refer to as the wayfinding. That obvious routes will be illuminated to lead you from one place to another in a natural manner. And alongside that, there's a number of places where we can enhance the greening, the nice parts of the town. The report contains some fairly well set out possibilities for this work, but the devil is always in the detail when you actually, if it's involving breaking ground anyway, you don't know what's in the ground until you put the spade in. So there has to be a huge amount of flexibility with this work, and what the recommendations are setting out is that it should be worked upon in consultation with the leader. So we've got the balancing act of if we make this decision, officers are authorised to get on and spend the money without having to come backwards and forwards for every little bit. But the leader, which will be myself for now, or whoever succeeds me in May, would work hand in glove with the officers to give that member involvement and to arbitrate, anything that needs to be considered more carefully. The outline of what's intended, I think, is quite clear, but it will need to be fine-tuned all the way along. So that being said, I think that's the outline of where we're at. Members, are there any particular comments anybody would like to make at this stage? So we've all looked at these pages so many times. It was discussed at the pack. I think the only real feedback was to just make sure that there was that cooperation between officers and members to develop the detail. But on that basis, I'm quite happy to move per the papers. Councillor Cooper was very quick to second there. If nobody has else anything to add to that, those in favour, please. That's unanimous, that's straightforward, and I think our first meeting is tomorrow to just look at the first parts of that. So let's get on with the work and deliver for Maidstone. Item 22, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy 24 to 29. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, this is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since 2002, local authorities have been required to publish a homelessness strategy outlining their intentions and visions for supporting those who face homelessness. In 2018, the government published their National Rough Sleeping Strategy, which obligated local authorities to include a special focus on rough sleeping. And this is our second combined homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. Maidstone last completed a strategy straddling 2019 to 2024. This was created before some major world events, including the pandemic, Ukraine and Afghanistan, and of course the cost of living crisis. However, we still managed to succeed in the action plan, and the new strategy is looking to build on that. Over the preceding 5 years, the number of people approaching for advice, support and guidance has significantly increased, and that is up from about 2,200 to 3,200, so an increase of 1,000 people approaching us. But the applications made for homelessness actually fell very slightly from 1,200 to 1,080, which I think is an indication of how well our prevention is actually working. There are three main reasons why people approach for homelessness support, which have been fairly static for the last 5 years. Those are victims of domestic abuse, family and friends no longer willing to accommodate people, and of course the end of private rented sector tenancies. Over the months of September to December 2023, we undertook a consultation for the new strategy. This involved online consultation, staff meetings, senior colleague meetings, and stakeholders. The priorities for the previous strategy were agreed to still be relevant and would be continued throughout the new strategy. These are prevention, accommodation, support for vulnerable groups, and the alleviation of rough sleeping. Our motivation has always been to prevent homelessness, as this is the best outcome for households, causing less stress and anxiety, and to reduce the financial burden for the council in temporary accommodation costs. This report has been to the pack, and I'm pleased to say it was extremely well received cross-party, to the point that I actually had a few councillors coming and congratulating the council on the report, the thoroughness of it, and the work that we are doing, which of course I have fed back to the team, because I think it's really important that people are appreciated and praise is given when it's due. So I would actually like to move as per the papers. Oh, and my little thing has gone off. Sorry about that. So that is the new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy attached to this report in Appendix B be adopted. But also, just to add, to delegate authority the head of housing and regulatory services to make any non-material typographical corrections or formatting changes as required from Appendix B. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any, Councillor Garton?
Just to second that, Mr. Chairman, I think the proof is in the pudding. Together with the cabinet member, I participated at the rough sleeper count last year when we trawled the streets and parks of Maidstone at night time on a national date. And unlike so many other local authorities, we hardly found any. I think it was less than 2 hands full of people rough sleeping. And I think that goes to show it's a proof that our strategy works and that our officers work according with the strategy very, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to just add that, you know, having been leader of this council for the last couple of years, I'm very proud of the work that this council does in relation to homelessness, the work of our housing team. The prevention work, I think, is not just world class, but it's sector leading, and others have looked to what we do for their own example as well. So very pleased to support this. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, did you want to come back?
Yes, I would actually, because I would just like to speak about the rough sleeping count that myself and Councillor Garton went on, and what really impressed me was the level of knowledge of the people that we went out with the people in our community who might be facing homelessness, where they might be sleeping, their background stories, where they've come from, where they might have gone to, and it was a really eye-opening experience. And I would certainly urge any councillor to actually, if they were interested, to attend that count. And in a way, it's bizarre to say this, but it was quite a positive experience, and I thought it much more so than I had thought it would be. So thank you.
Yeah, and this covers that extreme of rough sleeping all the way through to a family that perhaps their landlord doesn't want to renew a lease, and they find themselves in an impossible situation. So it's a very broad spectrum of work. Moved, seconded. May I ask those in favour, please? That's agreed per the pages with that additional recommendation. Thank you, members. item 23. This is about our work in preventing financial exclusion. There's some parallel to what we've just been talking about. The two things go hand in hand, but Councillor Mrs. Russell, would you like to lead us away on this?
Thank you. Yes, so this is a refresh of the Council's Preventing Financial Exclusion strategy. We were due a refresh because the original financial inclusion strategy was implemented in response to the COVID pandemic. So it's a midpoint, it was due a refresh. From this, and obviously it's been to the pack, and some of the comments from the pack were just how many things the Council has actually done to try and help prevent financial exclusion. And I know half of this is thanks to Councillor Parfitt-Reid, who had the portfolio before me. So I've carried on her good work. But I think this is a strategy that councillors can be really proud of. We've got numerous achievements, all based on data. So obviously, just to remind everyone, we've got 4 areas of deprivation within the top 10% of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the country. So that's what we're trying to work to help. We've based it all on data. So we've got the OneView project, which uses predictive analytics and data to prevent homeless supporting households at risk of crisis. We've got the LIFT dashboard, we've got a welfare officer, we've got different cost of living information pullouts that we've had, volunteering and funding event. We've got supported 56 groups with 3 rounds of funding, totaling £142,305 from the Council's Community Resilience Grant funding. And up until now, we've been delivering the Household Support Fund, again with the welfare officer, and enabling people from temporary housing, which I know my colleague was just talking about, to move into permanent housing, which is obviously a more sustainable route for them, and helping with food and fuel hardships. So, I mean, I think we've done a lot. There's more to do. The priority areas going forwards are maximising income for those who are at risk or in financial crisis, and yeah, you can see all of that. The only thing I would say is there are a few typos in there. So I would ask that my colleagues vote on the preferred option that's come through from the pack, which is on page 1169. We've got 1 and 2. So the progress on action supporting the financial inclusion, as highlighting paragraph 2.4 of the report and set out in the strategy appendix 1 be noted, and the refreshed preventing financial exclusion strategy and action plan appendix 1 be agreed, subject to typographical and presentational amendments, and updating the ward-based statistics, which we base everything on, to obviously reflect our new wards that are coming as a result of this May.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I'm very happy to second that, as you've said, and well, the risk of sounding a bit hard-hearted, but this isn't. I mean, the work we're doing there to support these residents that have the greatest need makes good financial sense for this council as well, because the more prevention work that we can do, that interplay with the housing issues, you know, we make the best use of the funds that we have by preventing bigger cost further down the line. So let's not be shy to remind ourselves of that. But you know, this is people and their lives that are very much on the line with this work. Moved, seconded. Any further comments, members? In which case, to the vote, those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 24. Slightly similar to the lighting and greening. It's a part of that UK Prosperity Funding, Arts Hub and Maker Space. Councillor Russell, would you like to talk to us about this as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is something I'm very excited about. It's obviously, like you said, part of the UK SPF. And first stage, we did a feasibility study, which you've got in this report, and it's come back and said that obviously we would like to try it in our town centre. Now, this is a trial, it's on a 3-year basis, and it's important that we trial it whilst not also spending an awful lot of council money and taxpayers' money that I think obviously could be spent on some of the issues that we've mentioned earlier, like the homelessness, the temporary accommodation. But this is exciting. I think this is based on the council's business terrace kind of thing that we've got going on already, but it's for messy creatives. So we'll have small spaces that people can rent from us to have their own little workshops. There'll be an exhibition space. Locationally, we are going to look to place it in Granada House, which is a building that we already rent the commercial space there. It's got good footfall, it's got good shops around there, and I think I'm hoping this will be a really positive thing for the town. It's got social value as well as commercial value, and I just think it's something we've got to try. Why not? It could be the thing that, you know, creates a whole new industry that then they move on to bigger spaces within our town centre for a relatively, I don't think it's a small amount, but for a relatively small outlay. We've not bought a building for this. It's very much a trial, and let's hope it absolutely flies. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Garton.
Would like to second that. Councillor Russell said, why not? I would say why, because this idea developed out of our discussions about the new town centre strategy. Town centres up and down the country and even internationally are changing in character. Due to the times we're living in, we have to find some new uses for the town centre and to keep it attractive. And this is a very simple but hopefully very effective way to bring new footfall into the town centre, to make the town centre attractive. Granada House belongs to the council at the moment. It's our own property, so there's not a lot of financial outlay there. It's something which is worth trying. And if it's a success, it's a success. Fingers crossed. If it isn't, we haven't really lost much. And that's what we as councillors should do, try new opportunities for Maidstone. And indeed, in words of Councillor Russell, why not?
I think this will work. I feel pretty slightly more positive. There's a nervousness because you never really know how, but if we look back on this, it'll be that we need to do it slightly bigger. But I think it's all about stimulating life in the town centre. This has elements of retail, but it also has elements of spectacle. We could see working artists doing their craft in the corners of this space. Maidstone's answer to Montmartre, I don't know, but look, why not? Why not? Why not have those shadow artists with the little sharp scissors doing silhouettes while you wait? This is about activity, life, reason to visit, stimulate the town centre. So I feel positive. Our only regret will be need to do a bit bigger, but let's start somewhere. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And you're right to be nervous because these things are complicated and we don't know for sure how it's going to work and whether it will work on our first attempt. What I would ask all members of this council going forward is, instead of saying, that was doomed to failure from the beginning and I told you so, if some aspects don't work, or we know that some aspects work better than others, let's tweak it as we go along. Instead of start pointing the finger of blame around, let's look at what has worked and what lessons can be learnt. I'm really pleased that we are embarking on this. I suspect it might be on slightly too small a scale, but that's how we reduce risk and let's get cracking on this way, and we'll will for it to succeed. And I know that the officer who's looking after it has fire in her belly for this, and it is only by taking that ownership actually that we will get this to work. So I think it's quite exciting, and let's hope that in 5 years' time it takes a completely different shape and absorbs and becomes a victim of it, not a victim, but a celebrant of its own success. But I'm delighted to support this, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Moved, seconded, and if there's no further comments, can I ask those in favour to proceed? Excellent. Unanimous. Now this feels almost from the sublime to the ridiculous. So we're making things 1 minute, but now we shall talk about demolition. But this is exciting new birth, demolition. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Cornell to give us some the outline of this, because I know this is the work that you've been getting in detail. If you would like to introduce it to start, then, well, oh, look, so sort it out amongst us. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. The former Royal Mail sorting office site, over the last few months, we've completed the land assembly, and we've put in a bid to Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities for Brownfield Land Release Fund monies to help deal with some of the abnormal costs of the redevelopment project. The terms of that funding mean that we need to let a demolition contract on the existing buildings by the end of this financial year. Officers have been through the usual procurement process, and we're looking for approval to let that demolition contract. In making this move, the risk that is covered in the report in the main is around, obviously, we are awaiting a planning committee decision on the project. Coincidentally, that is scheduled to happen on Thursday evening. But my view would be to be positive, let the demolition contract secure the grant funding monies and move to the next stage with the project.
Thank you. I do apologise for the confusion there, Councillor, but the Chief Executive said to me, "Oh, William's going to say something about this a little bit earlier on," and I kind of assumed it had all been. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, my introduction was much shorter.
Yeah, right. So I feel like I've got some skin in the game with this one, because this started originally as a joint project with County. I was involved in that original board that cooperated with them, and we went through lots of detailed exploration of, could we do this? Could we bunch it up with the land on the site next door? Eventually concluded that it needed just one party to pick this ball up and run and actually make a delivery. It's a key site as you come into the town. It's a gateway to the town. I'm going to say it's an eyesore in its current use. It was appropriate at the time as a Royal Mail sorting office, but cutting to the chase, finally we're getting on and delivering, and flattening the site is the first stage to development. So I'm really pleased as I come towards the end of my involvement here to see that something that I followed from day one, and it must be 6-7 years now, we're actually starting the work. So really pleased to see this. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid, you move per the papers?
Yes, I'm happy to move it as per the papers.
Okay, I'm getting new advice whispered in my ear. Bear with me while I pause for a second. Right. What's being explained to me that this is a very time-sensitive matter, so we have to be very careful of our urgency rules. So we're identifying it as something that may fall into that, but I'm not quite sure whether I'm being told we need to retrospectively check something in that regard or acknowledge it this evening. Do you want to? Perhaps I could ask Mr. O'Connell to spell that out for me.
Every cabinet decision has a call-in period on it. This decision needs to be taken before the end of the financial year. So we need to give, given how close we are to the end of the financial year, we need to give consideration as to whether urgency is required. So I just thought, in the interest of being open about requesting urgency, just to make sure Cabinet were aware of that before the decision was taken on it.
So I think we can say we acknowledge that those circumstances, but nonetheless it is moved, it is seconded. We're keen to get this underway. Councillor Cooper.
Just in the interest of transparency, is this decision being taken using the urgency rules or no? Sorry, I'm a little confused. So we're making the decision, but we need to make it now because it's urgent, but it isn't urgent followed by the council's constitution. Do you see where the confusion has arisen? Sorry to be awkward. I just think it's really important we are clear on this.
Okay, so we haven't sought the approvals for it to be an urgent decision, but if the need is there for it to be urgent and agreed by the end of the financial year, and we need to do that, then we will have to do that.
So should we be saying that the decision is subject to agreement or no? No. All right, so we are aware. I've got to say I'm still not 100% clear how we're navigating this. Please do.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Yeah, just to clarify, because the appropriate permissions haven't been sought, you can't take it as an urgent decision. However, the decision does need to be taken before the end of this month. There is time to apply the call-in, providing we publish the decision fairly quickly, and we would then have to, if it was called in, enact calling a scrutiny meeting and everything else very quickly. That is what we would do to make sure we meet your deadlines, but it's just to make you aware of the risk.
That makes sense. So if it's called in, we've got to act very, very quickly to deal with it to make sure we meet the timescales. Right. That makes perfect sense. I think it gives us the additional confidence to go ahead with considering the decision. May I ask those in favour, please? That's unanimous. That's carried. I do declare we've got to the end of the agenda. I will further declare that this is possibly the last Cabinet meeting for me. So I'd like to take that moment to thank both members and officers and lots of officers who are not here for all the support and help that has been given to me and to Cabinet in general. And, you know, I wish everybody the very best as the new administration forms in May, and may the good work of Maidstone continue. So thank you. And I shall close the meeting at that moment. Thank you.